I'm Leonie Barrie, the Managing Editor of Just Style, and will be presenting the first of today's sessions, looking at where the global apparel and footwear industry is heading this year. I'm also delighted to welcome Bob McGee, Fashion Industry Strategy Director at Infor, who's going to talk about the future of fashion. For those of you who don't already know him, Bob has more than 40 years' experience working in and with apparel, footwear, home textiles and fashion accessories companies, with hands-on experience sourcing apparel products around the globe. His knowledge and skills span retail, sourcing, manufacturing and product development within the fashion industry. Infor is a global provider of business software products, which is supplied to more than 1,000 customers in the fashion supply chain and more than 2,000 customers in fashion retail. Infor sponsored the first ever Just Style Confidence Survey, which brings together the opinion of clothing and textile professionals from around the world and acts as a snapshot of the issues executives are watching and a barometer of the industry's mood. The feedback is based on the readership survey we carried out earlier this year, so let's start first by taking a look at who took part. Just over half of respondents were apparel and footwear manufacturers and suppliers. 12.3% were fibre, yarn and fabric suppliers, and 8.2% were from the retail community. 17.2% were industry consultants, and another 9% were from fields including research, government, trade institutes and universities. One of the messages that came through loud and clear for 2013 is that clothing and textile companies are now acclimatised to the grim global economic outlook and have adjusted their strategies to try to continue to grow. When it comes to the outlook for the overall trading environment in 2013, economic uncertainty is probably the biggest challenge facing brands, retailers and consumers. However, while we're still facing a weak and uncertain economy, the sense is that overall 2013 should be better than 2012. Just over 40% of you thought things would improve in 2013, while another 43% are confident that conditions will not deteriorate further this year, and just 16% are expecting things to get worse. Little change on a challenging year is not much to cheer about, but it does provide an element of stability and suggests respondents are increasingly accustomed to operating in a challenging economic environment. The results tally with forecasts from Goldman Sachs, which sees global growth of around 3% in 2013, with about 2% growth in the United States, which is similar to last year, a slight contraction in the euro area, again just like last year, and about 8% growth in China. The bulk of apparel industry professionals also see reason for optimism when it comes to consumer confidence in the coming year, with just over 42% seeing it flat with last year and 36.5% hoping for an improvement. But just over 1/5 of you expect shopper sentiment to worsen this year. The results signal the state of today's consumers, where concerns about the state of the global economy continue to weigh on spending. The outlook for global economic development is clearly a mixed bag, but another theme that emerged in our survey is the increased level of concern clothing industry professionals have when they look to developed markets, notably those in the Eurozone. As this chart shows, it is apparent the Eurozone crisis, coupled with the mature, highly competitive and saturated nature of the European market, presents the greatest cause for concern in 2013. A massive 66.7% of respondents identified Europe as the market where conditions are least likely to improve over the next 12 months. The fragile state of the European economy was confirmed earlier this month in the spring forecast from the European Commission, which warned the Eurozone's recession will be even deeper than previously feared. The Commission forecast says euro area growth will shrink by 0.4% this year, and it's unlikely the Eurozone will return to growth until 2014. The bleak economic outlook is blamed on a lack of lending for consumers and businesses alike and high unemployment, both of which could potentially have a knock-on impact on household budgets and spending on fashion and footwear. But it is not only conditions in continental Europe that are of concern. More than 28% of respondents flagged worries about the UK's prospects. The UK economy narrowly avoided falling back into a recession last month, but fears persist that a triple-dip recession will still hit the market. The picture looks a little more relaxed in North America, where 17.2% highlighted concerns. In the US, for example, consumer confidence continues to be tested by high fuel and gasoline prices, but the Congressional Budget Office has predicted the economy will pick up as the year progresses, resulting in declining unemployment, growing household budgets, and improved consumer sentiment. Our survey also showed that a perhaps surprising 27.3% of apparel industry professionals also highlighted concerns over Asia's economic prospects, even though economies in the region have shown signs of resilience in the face of global economic weakness, with buoyant domestic demand driving growth. Our results seem to be borne out by a global survey of consumer confidence published by Nielsen earlier this month. By region, 42% of consumers in North America were upbeat about their spending on discretionary items such as clothing for the next 12 months. That was much higher than in the North American average of 33% over the past 3 years, and compared with 39% in Asia Pacific. But one thing is certain: high unemployment, the rising cost of living, government austerity are all putting ongoing pressure on consumer spending power. One obvious result of the gloomy economic outlook is a step up in competition and a focus on price positioning and promotion. This sentiment is evidenced in our predictions, with an overwhelming 72% of respondents anticipating an increase in promotional activity in 2013. 1/5 of you expect the status quo to remain over the next 12 months, and just 7.7% expect promotional pressures to ease. Likewise, a significant majority, 76% of respondents, anticipate the competitive environment will intensify in the coming year as the industry battles for consumers' constricting spending power. When it comes to key business initiatives over the next 18 months, answers were many and varied, with one simply summing it up as, "We have to be better than yesterday." Here's a snapshot of the comments we received. Build a flexible outsourcing strategy, investments in planning and PLM, fabric deliveries on time, shorten production cycle, enhance our capability to produce critical samples, offer in-house design and development solutions, use design and product development to upgrade product quality and move up the value chain, improve supply base to ensure quality products, merchandise mix to offer different price points, focus on production, innovation and provide better service, training suppliers, increase operational efficiencies and maintain competitive costs, get costs down and provide more value-added services to customers, widen supplier portfolio, moving out of China, invest in technology and product innovation for improved design and faster-to-retail solutions, increase flexibility, reduce lead times, increase profitability, consolidate current customers but be proactive in looking for new ones, focus on omni-channel integration, Asia expansion and cost control, and social accountability, product safety, and environmental initiatives. And when asked if they intend to implement new or improve existing business applications in 2013, 55.6% of respondents said this was part of their plans. As we saw from the earlier answers to companies' business initiatives, our survey respondents continue to be concerned by rising costs in the year ahead. A majority, 40.4%, 40.4%, said they expect sourcing costs to increase in 2013, with roughly an equal number believing that they will stay the same as last year or remain volatile. Their concerns are well-founded. The last couple of years have been a roller coaster as far as fabric, yarn and fibre prices are concerned, and while these have now stabilised to some extent, they've been replaced by double-digit wage growth and high inflation in most apparel manufacturing markets, along with rising fuel and utility costs. The upshot is that in most manufacturing countries, costs continue to rise faster than can be offset by productivity or efficiency gains. And of course, costs might be increasing, but consumers are not paying more. Passing higher prices along the supply chain is the decision favoured by 42.5% of you, with 34.3% saying it is not an option. In this next slide, and several of the others that follow, respondents were given the opportunity to select multiple answers, which is why the total comes to more than 100%. But the results give a good indication of where their priorities lie. As you can see in this one, in order of importance, strategies to reduce costs include collaboration across the supply chain, better raw materials management, streamlining the internal sourcing organisation, identifying new lower-cost vendors, exploring new sourcing hubs, and renegotiating with current vendors. Faced with few lower-priced countries to move to, the industry is waking up to the idea that the entire supply chain needs to work much more closely from one end to the other if it's to manage inflationary trends, achieve efficiency and speed. And this shift from a supply chain to a value chain perspective is something Bob will be talking about later. China continues to be the world's apparel and textile production powerhouse, with a 38% share of the world's garment export market. And Ministry of Commerce data suggests its growth shows little sign of slowing, with textile and garment exports in the first quarter of this year jumping 15.7% to $57.8 billion. Just under half of our survey respondents say they expect to source the same amount or more from China this year, reflecting the widespread support for Chinese suppliers, especially when it comes to quality and service. But that figure also means just over half of respondents plan to reduce their reliance on China. Rising costs and the need for greater flexibility and shorter lead times may well be prompting this change, along with well-documented labour shortages, high domestic cotton prices, and tough legislation to tackle its pollution problems. With its massive share of the world's apparel and textile market, there is no single substitute for China. But there has been a general consolidation of the world's apparel supply concentration in Asia, which does include China, rising from 1 to 2/3 of the total. This is borne out by 3/4 of our survey replies, who say their businesses are most likely to shift to alternative supply markets in Asia. In particular, the creation of the ASEAN Economic Community in 2015 is expected to offer opportunities for the region's clothing and textile industry. And the Source ASEAN Full Service Alliance, also known as SAFSA, is already working to link brands to mills and factories in the 10 ASEAN countries. But nearshoring closer to consumer markets in both Europe and the US is also seen as having renewed potential, thanks to benefits that include faster time to market and rapid response to more frequent replenishment and smaller batch sizes. And even Africa, with its low wages and relative proximity to Europe and the US, is on the radar for some of our respondents. Drilling down, supply countries that are of particular interest are led by Bangladesh, closely followed by Vietnam and Cambodia, then India and Pakistan. Again, this supports wider trends showing lower-cost countries are continuing to win business. In apparel exports, between 2008 and 2011, Cambodia and Vietnam in particular have experienced stronger average growth in the volume of their exports than China. But the value of their exports is still not even half as large as China's. So while these low-cost competitors are seeing rapid growth in their shipments, in terms of value, they're still much smaller figures. Low-cost competitors are winning business, but they're not a substitute for China. They're emerging as niche players. Interestingly, a large number of respondents also added Burma or Myanmar to the list, as barriers to business continue to come down. The EU last month lifted the last of its trade and economic sanctions against Burma, and is in the process of reinstating trade preferences that will give the exports duty and quota-free access to the European market for the first time since 1997. The US also lifted a decade-long ban on most imports from Burma last November. But is this optimism misplaced? The country suffers from a huge number of problems, including poor labour productivity, power shortages, little or no infrastructure, compliance issues, and access to capital, and it might not be as cheap as people seem to think. People who've spoken to Just Style suggest wages compare favourably with Bangladesh and are well below levels in other Southeast and East Asian countries. But the price of finished garments from Burma is likely to end up almost twice as high as those from Bangladesh. But of course, reallocating sourcing for what might turn out to be a short-term gain is not without its risks, especially if companies have invested in building successful supply chain arrangements over a significant period of time. Our survey reveals 65.5% of respondents plan to relocate up to 10% of their sourcing this year, with 20.7% looking to move between 10 and 25%, and 13.8% expecting to change their sourcing mix by 25% or more. Perhaps not surprisingly, given earlier answers that more than 40% expect sourcing costs to rise in 2013, the search for lower costs is driving the shift to alternative sources for 65.2% of respondents. Next comes the need for increased flexibility, speed of delivery and shorter lead time, quality, smaller minimum orders, supply-based consolidation, and regional stability. There's no doubt that the one issue sitting at the top of the industry's agenda this year is social and environmental sustainability. A massive 73.2% of respondents say it's likely to be even more important this year than last, with just under 26% seeing it having the same weighting. That's a total of 99%. And it's worth pointing out that this poll was carried out before last month's tragic building collapse in Bangladesh, where more than 900 people have lost their lives. In many ways, the clothing and textile industry is leading the way, especially in areas like standards and indexes for assessing sustainability, efforts to eliminate toxic discharges, cut CO2 emissions and energy use, material waste, and develop new environmentally friendly washes and finishes. Regular factory inspections and audits, supplier training and education have helped eradicate child labour as well as improve health and safety. But what the tragedies in Bangladesh have shown is that despite the huge amounts of time, effort and resources that have been ploughed into compliance, current practices and procedures aren't working as they should. Longer and more dispersed supply chains make it harder to ensure transparency and accountability, but more important than ever that such mechanisms are in place. Losing control of your supply chain exposes your company to great risks, yet at the same time consumers are looking for more transparency and more information on what they are spending their money on. With intensifying competition and the sluggish recovery in Western Europe and North America taking a toll on sales, it's not surprising fashion brands and retailers are continuing to seek out growth in new markets. According to our survey, 38.9% of respondents plan to increase their investment in growing exports during 2013, while 35.8% expect this to stay the same as last year. Just over a quarter say they don't intend to spend more in this area. Among the BRIC markets, China stands out as the one seen as having most growth potential, according to 37.8% of our respondents, thanks to the emergence of a global middle class of 300 million consumers, all of whom have enormous spending power. Despite concerns that China's GDP growth has slowed, reaching 7.9% in the first quarter of 2013, compared to developed markets, this growth rate remains enviable, and it also looks set to remain steady in the coming year. Next biggest opportunities are seen for India at 31.7%, Brazil at 19.5%, and Russia at 11%. The growth of e-commerce continues apace, so it's not surprising our respondents see multi-channel, online and mobile shopping offering the greatest opportunities for growth this year. Online sales are driving retail sales growth in developed markets, with Forbes estimating that online retail was worth $262 billion in the US in 2012 and should jump by 41% to $370 billion by 2017. And as consumer spending begins to rebound, retailers are racing to deliver a consistent omni-channel experience, online, in-store, and via mobile apps. Advances in technology also provide an opportunity for omni-channel retailers to analyze how customers browse and shop, as well as helping personalize the shopping experience with individual recommendations and offers. But one of the big challenges is to create a single view across channels, making sure products are available when and where shoppers want to buy them. So what does all this boil down to? While the apparel industry does not expect things to get much better in 2013, the good news is that things are not expected to get an awful lot worse either. Indeed, the vast majority of survey respondents expect to grow their businesses this year. With only 3% of respondents anticipating contraction, this bullish outlook suggests the clothing sector remains relatively upbeat in the face of some significant challenges. In summary, here are 10 takeaways from Just Style's confidence survey. 2013 will be better than recent years. Even if macroeconomic conditions don't appear to be heading in a much better direction, especially in the Eurozone, the apparel industry will do better, if for no other reason than it's had to sharpen up in the past few years. Relative to demand, there is still a lot of supply in the market, and this means conditions remain intensely competitive as the industry battles for consumer spending. And against this background, rising costs are one of the biggest concerns, with the search for cheaper, faster, better seen as key to a competitive edge. Just under half of our survey respondents say they expect to source the same amount or more from China this year, with beneficiaries of production shifts including Bangladesh, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Burma. And playing fair, sourcing transparently, and delivering a justified relationship between price and value are becoming increasingly important. There will also be new opportunities in omni-channel growth, which may offer some respite as consumer spending begins to rebound. I'm now going to hand over to Bob McKee, Fashion Industry Strategy Director at Infor, who's going to talk about the future of fashion.
Thanks, Leonie. I'm certain that I'm not going to be as well-spoken as you are. For those of you who are not from the United States, I have a very strange accent. I come from Chicago. If we could go to the next slide. I'm going to talk about a number of things from a very high level. Again, remember my background is primarily in the apparel industry. I have worked for a software company for the last 15 years. My background in the industry has helped us to service our customers in a much, much better way. And what I'm going to give you is a number of observations that I've made relative to the industry over the past, oh good grief, entirely too long, 40 plus years. A number of months ago, I was in an event, and the people running the event, the guy who was president of the organization, got up in front of the group and said, The mantra of the fashion industry is to seduce the consumer and control the supply chain. So I thought for a moment and said, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That is kind of what we do. And immediately my mind went to, go to the next slide, please. Seduce the consumer. Obviously, what we're trying to do is attract their attention. We want to get their mind share. We want consumers to want us. And I think back along the route of the industry, and the seduction of the consumer has primarily been through our history relative to our products. The product was the seduction device. Next slide, please. But I'm afraid that the seduction since about October of 2008 has actually been one of price. We spend a tremendous amount of time obsessing over prices, costs, and such, but I think some of that is horribly misfocused. The consumer has come to the realization if they wait long enough, we will drop our prices. They don't have to consider buying until they see 50% off. They don't have to get serious about buying until they see 70% off, and they don't actually have to buy until they see 80% off. This is an awfully dire situation because what we're ending up with is essentially a race to see who can price things the cheapest, who can secure them for the lowest possible price, mark them up the most in order to have assurance that they will make profits at the end of the day. And while doing this, we've seen most organizations ending up with net profits that are ever decreasing. We have gross margins, we have net margins, and we have net margins in this industry. Obviously, our gross margin is our prediction, which of course never comes true. Our net margin is after all of our markdowns, and of course the net margin is after all markdowns, returns, and adjustments. Sadly, we're not making much money at the end of the day. Next slide, please. And the sad thing is that price as the seduction is frankly a race to the bottom. If price is your only differentiation, if product is less and less a differentiation, it's only a matter of time until you can't get any lower. But there will always be some competitor who's willing to go just a bit lower in order to drive you out of business. So the race to the bottom and the seduction based solely on price, and for those of you who may disagree with me, go walk around retail for a while. Go take a look at the stores and see a vast sea of sameness. We're all kind of copying one another during this period of time. We're really not seeking to differentiate ourselves through product as much as we are through price. Often you can't even see in store windows, in shop windows, because the sale signs have taken over all the space. You can't see through to the product. Next slide, please. We need to recognize that we have to control what we can control. We don't control commodity prices or commodity costs. And if you take a look at our products are made primarily of commodities. The majority of products in the industry are made of either cotton or synthetic. And cotton is a commodity. 2.5 years ago, we watched the commodity of cotton triple in price over a relatively short period of time. Commodities rise and fall based on their own indicators and for their own reasons. The cost of cotton rose substantially because of fears in the market that there was going to be a shortfall of cotton required for production. Therefore, the price went up. We don't control labor costs. We seek out cheap labor costs, but we don't control them. There was a flight of people buying product from China to Bangladesh because Chinese prices started to rise. Chinese labor costs started to rise more than anything. There were numbers of attempts by Chinese manufacturers to try and control costs as best they could, but the labor costs did cause rising prices. So we jumped on airplanes and we headed to Bangladesh. and we found lower labor costs. But seeking out lower labor costs is not necessarily the best answer. We've then also seen a number of human rights related issues, and we've not only seen the building collapse that Leonie mentioned, but before that, we had a fire in which 120 people were killed. We've had numbers of labor strikes, and we've had numbers of requests by the Labor Department to increase wages for the people who are working in the sewn products industry. We're also an energy-intensive industry. We don't control the cost of energy. The top three things that really are costs in our world, we don't control. We have no control over them. If we think we can, fine. We're not going to be able to control them. The best we can do is to create some strategic hedging philosophies in our sourcing policies that will allow us to source in smarter ways or engineer products in smarter ways. What do we control? Well, we can control the efficiency of our product engineering. We can engineer products from the beginning. I'm one of those people who came from manufacturing. I believe sincerely that concept designers, for the most part, have to have a greater understanding of how to conceptualize products that will actually be able to be engineered in a better, smarter way for manufacturing without disturbing the inherent characteristics of the product. We can control how we design the products. We can also control how we work together as a value chain. And one of the keys, from my perspective, is that we as an industry have to recognize the impact of us working together as a value chain rather than trying to sub-optimize each one of the components, breaking the textile part away from the manufacturing part, away from the retailing part. We as an industry have to recognize that what's good for one is good for all. What's bad for one is bad for all, and we can't just pass the bad news back to the guy ahead of us in the supply chain or in the value chain line. Next slide, please. I think the paradigm has to shift. We have to move away from seduce the consumer and control the supply chain to listen to the consumer and collaborate with the supply chain. The consumer is trying to tell us what they want. We're just not listening. We have all kinds of technology available to us that allows us to listen to the consumer differently than we have in the past. Today we're using things like Twitter and Facebook to try and push information to consumers. Seldom are we actually asking them for their opinion. It's contrary to our traditional model. When we speak of things like Asian issues of corporate social responsibility, how that's become such an important issue to us, the reality is corporate social responsibility has been an issue in our industry forever. We have a lot of inheritance in the issues of corporate social responsibility. We as an industry have gone through tons of changes over hundreds of years. If we go back to the Industrial Revolution, the beginning of the Industrial Revolution was driven by the textile industry. The textile industry in England. The United Kingdom was a huge manufacturer of textiles and sewn products. And one of the things that drove the textile production out of England and to North America, quite frankly, was corporate social responsibility. It was the issue of child labor. Child labor wasn't acceptable any longer, but it was acceptable in North America. These colonies, these loosely coupled groups that became the United States. So we moved from one place to another because we wanted to still be able to utilize child labor. And over time, child labor became something that wasn't acceptable in the United States, and we moved somewhere else. Of course, child labor is not something that we want to condone. I'm not suggesting that for a second. But we also have to recognize our own inheritance as an industry. If we're always seeking out not child labor, but lower labor costs alone, we're going to run the risk of those sorts of things being part of our inheritance as an industry. Next slide, please. So where is the international apparel industry heading, and what are the things driving us? Certainly sustainability is one of those things, and sustainability can be defined really as human rights and environmental compliance. As an industry, we want to talk about things like fair trade, free trade, and a living wage, but yet we're willing to go anywhere to find a lower labor cost. But we don't look inside for how we can actually become more efficient as organizations. We need to look at ways that we can actually trim waste from our product. Again, as an industry, we're not terribly efficient. We have to find out how to be more efficient. Our average marker is 85 to 87% efficient, which means 13 to 15% of all the fabric we put up on a cutting table is going to go into somebody's trash. The reality is we have to get smarter and better and more efficient at figuring out how to better utilize all the material. Material is being thrown away. That goes to both cost and environmental compliance. Sourcing, we have to become much more strategic. Anybody who thinks we're going to get rid of China as a source is absolutely out of their mind. More than 50%, probably closer to 60% of all the sewn products in the world are still coming from China. The reality is, yes, prices are rising and people are doing things to try and keep prices in a contained manner. And in fact, there was more manufacturing of sewn products last year in China than the year before. Where is it going? It's not going to export anymore. It's going to service the Chinese economy. We need to look at things like nearshoring. I was recently at a meeting of an organization here in the United States called AAPN, American Apparel Producers Network. Nearshoring, manufacturing things in Central America, the Caribbean, South America as it relates to servicing North America, Eastern Europe for Western Europe, for other parts from other parts of Asia to service China, India, huge populations with growing economies. Blended sourcing is a bit of the answer. And quite frankly, sourcing for us is going to be here, there, and everywhere. It's not going to be a single location. Bangladesh, sadly, is not going to be the be-all and end-all. It is not going to be the next China, in my opinion. Look at logistics and value-added service as one of the ways in which you can significantly enhance your value to your customer, whether that be a retailer or a consumer. Figure out ways to differentiate yourself other than just continuing to drop your prices, because you won't be able to continue that forever. Next slide, please. This is our sourcing world today. This is not necessarily our sourcing world for tomorrow. I've been around long enough to know that the sourcing world, the sourcing paradigm shifts. When I started in this business, we were sourcing hardly anything from China. Today, we source almost everything from China, and that's been about a 30-year period of time. There will be an ebb and flow, there will be shifts, and it may very well even move outside of Asia. Think about the logistics side of this. When you're considering things like Myanmar, you're looking at how you're going to source from Bangladesh. Well, how are you also going to get it from Myanmar and Bangladesh to your destination? Next slide, please. We have a big, wide world out there. There are lots of opportunities. There are lots of opportunities, and there are lots of opportunities inside our own organizations to do a much better job. Next slide, please. We have to learn how to differentiate, discern the difference between shopping and buying. The consumer has found the difference. Shopping is research, buying is the commitment, and they're not connected. We have to recognize that this e-commerce world, this multi-channel environment in which we live, gives the consumer the ability to find the product that they're looking for through whatever research methods they're planning on using, whether that be bricks and mortar or web activity or whatever, and then make a separate purchase decision based on things like price, delivery, and service. We have to learn how to fill the needs of the consumer in the best possible way, in the way they're looking for the service to be provided to them. Next slide, please. So a summary of some of my thoughts. We as an industry are obsessed with unit cost, but we don't tend to think about the highest cost in our value chain, which is the cost of markdowns. And yes, there are people who will say, Bob, it's not really a cost. Yes, I realize that. I'm taking some poetic license. It is a dilution to profits. Most of the product that we end up sending into the value chain ends up going on sale at some point in time. Yes, that may be planned. It may also be not planned. That's why we're having such low net profits. We'll only become more efficient at driving down unit cost when we begin to engineer it into the product. Material and labor. Material is a commodity. We're not going to be able to control the cost. Yes, hedging philosophies will help, but how many companies are actually doing strategic sourcing with a hedging philosophy that looks at the potential of commodity prices rising or falling? Labor is the smallest percent. By the time it gets to retail, the labor component that you have moved everywhere in the world to try and control is actually the smallest percent of the total cost that goes to the consumer. Look for ways to flow product. Look for ways to gain assortment that's produced and delivered and pushed in front of the consumer. Smaller for more frequent batches and orders, and create replenishment cycles so that there are not commitments of inventory to inventory in a place or another that may not be able to use it. Next slide, please. In order to get better results, you have to consider a few things. And everybody gets upset when I go through this first one, which is, quite frankly, you don't know what you don't know. Question things all the time. Think outside of the box. Consumers are telling you what they want, but we're not listening. They're telling you, in many cases, with their spending habits. Consumer confidence is something that will come and go. Right now in the United States, the stock market is growing like crazy, but consumer confidence really hasn't improved significantly because unemployment rates are still very high. Consumer confidence will come and go, but consumer confidence often for our industry operates at an inverse rate to what happens to consumer or capital goods. During the period of time when consumer confidence is relatively low and people have relatively little money, they do still find the money to buy certain sewn products. You need a new shirt or a new tie to go on that job interview. You'll buy it. If you need a new automobile, you're not going to buy it because that's a capital purchase. It requires a lot more commitment. So we have to look at consumer confidence and break it down to its various elements and recognize that, consumer confidence is one of those things. Food and fashion do continue to be purchased, just not at the same rate. Food you buy because you have to. Fashion you buy because you want to. Operational efficiencies are our next source of real profits. Make your organization as efficient as you possibly can. We're throwing tons of money away, yet we're traveling all over the world to try to figure out where we can get 2 cents an hour labor. Theories become realities by doing. Don't be afraid to implement theories in your organization because they will work. They will change the way the organization is operating. Parallel processes will increase the speed of decision making. And the optimization of a broken process will never make it better. So to try to become more efficient at one little piece, unless you're looking at the whole, will never actually produce the results you're after. In the interest of time for Q&A, I think we should move to the next slide. I have a couple of quick little statements that I want to close with. I think that we have to recognize that a lot of what we're all responding to is media hysteria. Yes, there is a difficulty in the global economy. We have watched it. We've watched it come and go. We have to remember also that media hysteria, other than, of course, Just Style, which is very good media, we recognize that we're being told to be afraid of what's going on in the economy. Well, the only way we're going to get better is if we recognize that it's not going to be as bad as we think it is. And recognize that the economists that are giving us all the predictions, there's an old expression, economists were put on this earth to make fortune tellers look good. And with that, I'll hand it back to Leonie.
Thank you very much indeed, Bob. We're now going to move on to the question and answer session, and we'll do our best to get through everything that we've in the time that we have. But any questions that we don't manage to answer today will be followed up by email. I'm going to start by asking you a question. When we spoke about the survey results, you described them as depressing and predictable. So what's your advice, Bob, about how to convert the race to the bottom to the race to the top?
Well, I think that we need to recognize the holistic vision of the industry. I think we need to learn how to differentiate ourselves. I think we need to recognize that our differentiation needs to go back to a product focus rather than a price focus. I think that if we take a look, that there's a great divide in the industry. We're talking out of both sides of our mouth. We want better, faster, cheaper, and then we go rushing off to places that have never made sewn products before. We're also embracing fast fashion, which essentially is at an inverse social status. They're standing to corporate social responsibility. We're buying disposable products, apparel products that end up being worn for a few weeks or months, and then they're in the trash. We say that we want X, and our behavior says that we're going to do Y. As an industry, I think that we have to look from the front to the back. We have to recognize the consumer is driving this bus. I think that right now there's a tremendous pushback on the part of organized retail to say to the consumer, no, I'm in charge. And the consumer is saying, no, I'm in charge. I think the sooner we come to the reckoning that says the consumer really is in charge, the consumer is going to decide and, frankly, do everything we possibly can through the value chain, working together for the betterment of the value chain, to make sure that we're fulfilling the desires of the consumer is the only thing that's going to take us from the drive to the bottom to the drive to the top. If we're all doing exactly the same thing in exactly the same way, we're not giving the consumer any reason whatsoever to shop in one place versus another.
And following on from that, and picking up on your observation that the industry is obsessed with price and cost, do you think we've reached the end of cheap clothing?
No, and let's clarify that just a bit. I think we're obsessed with unit cost. We're not really obsessed with price. We're not really obsessed with cost because we're not doing much to make ourselves much more efficient. How long does it take to approve a lab dip? How long does it take to approve a first sample? How many times do we request a sample from a supplier? Are we doing everything we can to virtualize that environment? Are we doing everything we can to actually make the utilization of material much tighter so that we're not throwing that 13 to 15% of the fabric away? We're obsessing over labor costs because we're running everywhere we possibly can to find cheaper labor. Quite frankly, today you can get cheaper labor in Haiti than you can in Bangladesh. We're obsessing over what it costs to make the stuff, but we're not looking at the total delivered cost to our facility or to our consumer. Do I think the end of cheap clothing has arrived? No. I think there's a lot we can do to actually reduce the cost. It's not only labor driven.
And what would your advice be to reduce the cost? I mean, what would you suggest companies focus on instead?
Focus on internal improvement. Focus on value chain improvement. figure out ways that between the consumer and the smallest possible trim or finding supplier, you can communicate all the information that is needed to make people more efficient. So that not everybody is having to put some portion of set aside in order to cover for that vagary of not knowing what's going to happen next.
Bob, we've had a couple of questions in from people who are listening to our webinar today. And they're about seeking alternative sources. One has said we're not only seeking an alternative to China, but also alternatives to Bangladesh. Where will these volumes move to?
Well, that's one of those things. Like I said, first of all, my education is in industrial management and economics, so I'm one of those fortune teller guys. If you follow the money, the next logical place or places that we're going to be looking at will likely be in Africa. Certainly Bangladesh is a reality, and while we spend a lot of time thinking about and talking about the disasters that have happened, there are also a lot of very reputable organizations operating in Bangladesh. We do tend to focus on those that are not reputable, and some of what's happening in Bangladesh is a reality of too much growth too fast. I think certainly we'll be looking at moving to Myanmar, but I think there's no infrastructure to support the industry. I think if you look across the globe at places where you have large populations that are prepared to move from agricultural to apparel, which is the typical evolution of economies, moving from agricultural environments into apparel manufacturing or textile manufacturing, Central Africa is the most logical. If you also follow the money, you'll see there's a lot of Chinese investment going on in roads and infrastructure, just like there was in China. So I think at some point in time in the relatively near future, within the next couple of decades, we'll be looking at Central Africa as a likely source for sewn products.
And do you think that the tragedy in Bangladesh will change buyers' attitudes to the country?
Well, I think again we respond based on a fair amount of hysteria. Even though the global economic downturn was very real, I think that media hysteria fanned the flames and certainly helped it to be significantly worse and move faster than ever before. I think the same thing is true of Bangladesh. We're not spending much time talking about those factories that actually are doing things in a positive way. We're not spending much time talking about those that are operating in an ethical manner. One of the things that came out of the meeting that I was at just this last week, one of the suppliers from Central America, who's a pretty good-sized supplier, said something that I thought was very interesting. He had a group of buyers in his factory, and they were pushing him about corporate social responsibility. And he said very frankly, we pay more than average, but if you're really interested about the welfare of our workers, you pay me 25 cents more per item, and I will give it directly to the workers. 25 cents more per item, I'll give it directly to the sewers. And the buyer looked at him and said, basically, you're crazy. I would never do that. Well, there you go. We've got a situation where we are going to continue to obsess over the cost of labor. We are going to do everything we can to keep the labor component as low as we possibly can. Corporate social responsibility is not only the supplier, the sewer's responsibility. We have in the United States and in the European Union passed laws that have essentially said you are responsible for what your supplier and his supplier and his supplier are doing from a ethical perspective relative to both human rights and environmental compliance. As that continues to change and it's more utilized and becomes a stricter set of guidelines, I think we're going to find the landscape change a bit based on that.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm actually jumping around a little bit on the questions because I'm trying to answer or ask all those that we've got coming in, and obviously there's a great diversity coming in from our listeners today. Another question is, how do you see virtual product development affecting the apparel industry?
That's great. I think it's it is one of those questions I actually like because it goes to the core of what I've been trying to say. Fundamentally, we need to change the way we're doing things. I think that again, we are a tactile industry where you're going to have to, at some point in time, you're never going to be able to get to virtual production, but you will be able to get to virtual product development through about 90% of the process. And at the end of the whole thing, you're still going to have to touch and feel and look at a product. But virtual product development is key.
Thank you. And do you see TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Negotiations, as a potential game changer?
I don't know. I have mixed feelings on the legislation. I think that, first of all, legislation and trade agreements and all that are used as a tool and a weapon. We have learned that it's often a stronger weapon to use economic gain and loss between governments than to be hurling real weapons at one another. I'm concerned about the impact, yet I'm hopeful that it will be a positive for the industry.
And we've had a couple of questions in about omnichannel. What's the best way to implement omnichannel retail in a competitive environment? And another question asks about decentralizing the distribution system with regards to moving to omnichannel.
Well, I think everybody should be figuring out ways to decentralize the distribution system. When we take a look at some of the people or organizations that have been most successful, you look at their distribution logic and you see that the only inventory that they really own is bags and boxes. And they actually ship directly from the manufacturer or from some distribution point, but from the manufacturer wherever possible. The order comes in, it's then sourced directly from whoever is manufacturing it. All they own is an inventory of bags and boxes. They slap the label on and away it goes. I think that we need to keep things in the most logical position and not add cost by moving it around in one place or another. There was an interesting article not long ago about a major retail organization that was spending $1 million+ to their systems in order to be able to get global use of their inventory, because their inheritance was that they would keep store inventory separate from online inventory. And even worse than that, store inventory by location was hidden from between stores so that they could keep track of their KPIs and they could actually very efficiently see how well or judge how well a store manager or a divisional merchandise manager was doing. Well, to separate inventories in order to be able to get KPI information is sort of contrary to the real mission of retail, which is to move merchandise to consumers. I think that the global use of inventory, having one available to ship to the next customer in line, is exactly what you're after.
Thank you. And another question, we're probably getting to the end of our questions, just given the time that we've got available. Will differentiation cut down costs, as differentiation itself means investment?
Well, first of all, differentiation depends on, will it cut down costs? It's possible. It depends on what the differentiation is. I think that the other side of it is that differentiation can actually enhance demand. Rather than cutting cost, it may not have an immediate impact on cost, but it may have a very positive impact on demand. And again, what you're able to sell a product for is a combination of both supply and demand. It's not just an issue of cost. If you have high demand, you may not have to mark the things down. recognizing that the highest cost we're dealing with is the cost of markdowns. If you can trim those markdowns because you enhance demand through differentiation, you've actually had a net impact positive to your profit and loss.
And how do you think the digital retail world will force new thinking on sourcing and CSR?
First of all, I think we've only scratched the surface of the digital world across the board. I think at some point in time, we're actually going to be producing digital apparel products. When you take a look at YouTube or you actually see digital printers at work, the digital world is, today we're looking at the digital world and we're thinking of it primarily of our laptops, our tablets, our smartphones. But I think we're looking at a multitude of mobile devices and a mobile way of life that probably doesn't even exist at this moment, except in some think tanks in the highest technology universities in the world. I think we're going to have things that are printed for us on site. We're going to conceive of something and it's going to be able to be made for us. The whole issue of mass customization, getting what it is we want specific to the way we want it made for us in a way we want it made is certainly within the technological realm, and it's one of those things that will only come into commercial use as the demand for that grows. I think we've only scratched the surface.
We did also have a question on mass customization, but you may feel that you've covered it. Where do you see mass customization in the overall apparel industry?
Well, today we look at mass customization, and it's by and large defined by embroideries and screen prints and things like that, or the ability to possibly combine components and make something a bit different. We have customers today that are in the footwear industry, or we even have one that makes golf shoes, and you can go to their website and you can create your own golf shoe. I think again, mass customization is one of those things that we're all going to have our own avatars stored on a cloud somewhere that is created from a body scan, and from that we're going to be able to call it up, create a product. The product will be printed on a three-dimensional printer. It's perhaps not even sewn. It's put together in some seamless technology, and boof, delivered to us, or it materializes on our kitchen counter because we finally managed to create the transporter device that they used in Star Trek. You know, mass customization is going. How do I put it? I think the mass in the mass customization is going to be the thing that gets pulled out. We're going to figure out how to fulfill the desire of a single consumer in a single instance in a single way. The ability to create a single product as the way that individual wants it is going to be the future of mass customization.
And why don't we hear about Central America featuring as a choice for buyers, especially in North America?
Oh, we do. Actually, there was a 30% increase in products shipped from Central America into the United States last year, and 30% increase the year before into the United States. So it's been growing quite nicely. Central America is quite a viable alternative, and as skills continue to grow and availability continues to grow, it will become more and more important. I think that certainly there's an allure when it comes to Asia. There's the Asian mystique. I think that a lot of buyers that are buyers today don't know anything other than Asia. Only the people who've been around for a long time realize that there was a sourcing reality before Asia, and there will be a sourcing reality after Asia. I think that sourcing people today have to take a look at the globe and recognize that it is a global opportunity. Central America and the Caribbean relative to North America, again, Middle East, Eastern Europe are all possibilities relative to Europe. And don't think for a moment that the countries that make up BRICS or the other emerging or fast-growing economies of the world aren't looking at ways that they will compete for the sources as well. I think we're going to see quite a shift going on in the sourcing world over the next decade.
Bob, thank you. I think that's a great place to end today's webinar. We've had some really great questions today, and I'd like to thank everyone who's taken the time to send them through. And before we began today's webinar, Bob, you told me you'd be pretty much able to talk about anything, and I really think you've proved that point to us all today. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. You're quite welcome. The key to it is having been around a long time and having a decent memory.
Well, we all hope we sort of still retain our faculties. Thank you very much indeed, Bob, for joining us today, and thank you too for sponsoring the webinar. And of course, thank you to everyone who's been listening. Thank you to everyone who sent in some great questions, and also to everyone who took the time to complete our survey in the first place, which obviously made today possible. And just to remind you all again, an audio-visual version of the webinar will be available at justdial.com/webinars, and we will also email you a link to it. And keep checking that page for more details of upcoming webinars. So finally, I'd like to say thank you and goodbye.